Good morning. Welcome to Breakfast with Dan Walker and Naga Manchetti.
Our headlines for you, 8 o'clock this morning. The battle over Theresa May's legal advice on Brexit. Labour warns of a constitutional crisis if it isn't published in full. The government says the details have to remain confidential.
The government's chief lawyer will set out his thinking here in Parliament a little later, but will he be forced to set out more than he would like to?
A big fall in the money spent on care for the over 65s. We begin a special series on the challenge of looking after the most vulnerable people in society.
The human cost of the crisis on the high street. At least 40,000 jobs have been affected by the turmoil in retail this year, with thousands of redundancies and many more roles still under threat.
A dramatic day of derbies in the Premier League. The Liverpool manager Jurgen Klopp has apologised for his celebration after their late winner over Everton at Anfield.
Lost and found, the engagement ring that was dropped in New York down a grate, and the British couple who thought they'd never see it again.
And it is a cold start to the day across many northern parts of the UK, milder in the south with a bit of rain later on. I'll have a full forecast in about 15 minutes.
Good morning, it's Monday the 3rd of December. Let's bring you up to date with our top story. The government's chief legal advisor, the Attorney General, will publish a shortened version of his guidance on Theresa May's Brexit withdrawal agreement today. MPs of all parties are demanding to see the document in full.
Some of them believe it contains a suggestion that the UK could end up in an indefinite customs union with the EU, and the government are trying to hide that information. Well, our political correspondent Chris Mason is in Westminster for us. Chris, this is all about the power of knowledge, isn't it? What the Attorney General knows and how much we and Parliament need to know about that.
Yeah, that's the absolute crux of it, Dan. So the Cabinet and senior members of the government have seen this full unvarnished advice from Geoffrey Cox, the Attorney General, the government's chief legal advisor. Plenty within Parliament say that they should see it too, so that they can make a decision a week tomorrow in this big vote in full possession of all of the facts. Now, the argument that the government makes is that there has to be confidentiality between a lawyer and a client, and if lawyers are going to be full and frank and sort of thrusting in their advice, saying absolutely everything in an unvarnished way, they have to expect that it isn't going to get splashed all over news bulletins and newspapers every time they write it. And the government makes the argument that they are sending Mr Cox here to Parliament to face questions today. But a lot of pressure from opposition parties and from a good number of Conservatives saying, hang on a minute, this is a massive decision. You guys have seen this stuff, so we should see it as well.
And it's the start, Chris, of a whopping week again for the Prime Minister.
A whopping week indeed. Let's take a look, because no Monday morning should start without this, with a look at the Brexit diary. So as I say, we've got Geoffrey Cox and his legal advice, or at least some of it, being talked about in Parliament today. Then tomorrow we see the start of these big few days of debate around the Prime Minister's Brexit deal. And then come the weekend, we can tell you one thing. We can tell you that Dec and Holly will be appearing and talking about all things the final in the jungle. And maybe, just maybe, there'll be a debate involving Jeremy Corbyn and the Prime Minister, and potentially some others. But we don't know it'll definitely happen, because there's a debate, about which channel it'll be on, about what the format will be, about who'll be involved, about whether or not there'll be somebody there to advocate another referendum or to advocate a clean Brexit. In other words, it's not quite nailed down yet. Jungle, yes. Debate, maybe. And then a week tomorrow, that absolutely crucial vote. And as things stand, the likelihood of the Prime Minister winning that vote is up there with me winning the next World's Strongest Man contest. Take a look at me and come to your own conclusion.
Small in stature, big in heart, Mr Mason.
I'll take that.
He's deceptively strong, that Chris
Yeah,
Mason,
I reckon.
you know.
You know those, when they lift those big stones onto the top, I'm sure he could do that.
He just... There you go, easy. Time now is 4 minutes past 8. The amount of money that councils spend on care for the elderly in England, Scotland and Wales has fallen in the last 8 years. This according to figures analysed by the BBC.
The biggest drop was in England, where the amount councils say they've spent plummeted by nearly a quarter. In Wales and Scotland have largely protected their budgets. In Wales, it fell by 8%. Scotland was cut by just 7%.
There are no comparable figures for Northern Ireland, and the government says the figures don't take into account the money the NHS in England puts into the care system. Here's our social affairs correspondent, Alison Holt.
Like a cup of tea? No? What about a glass of bitter lemon?
This is a day when 89-year-old Dottie Harmon simply doesn't want to get out of bed. She has Alzheimer's and needs constant care. It means her daughter Sam has seen firsthand the pressures on the care system that today's analysis of spending reveals.
Mum was dancing in my garden to a song called Happy.
Sam's videos and pictures show the contrast to how life used to be for Dottie. But when the illness took hold and they needed help, it was hard to get. Her mum spent nearly 3 months on a hospital ward before they found a bed in a local authority-funded home.
There's lots of expensive places for people to go. But if you don't have £5,000 a month, well, between £4,000 and £5,000 a month, then you have to wait for a local authority bed. It's crucial that as families we find somewhere that is spot on.
Because it's really tough.
Yeah.
The BBC's analysis shows council spending on care for each person aged 65 and over has fallen in the last 8 years, with the biggest drop in England. Here at Age UK Portsmouth, they say that's meant the loss of many early help services.
I think in the long run it's costing us more because people are reaching that crisis point which could possibly have been prevented, and then they perhaps need more support, more help.
Councils say cuts to their funding have meant they've had to make difficult choices. The government maintains it's put more than £3.6 billion extra into care this year and that it will publish plans for its long-term funding soon. Alison Holt, BBC News, Portsmouth.
Now, tomorrow we'll be taking a look at social care in Scotland, where spending is higher than in England and Wales, and asking, even though it's higher, is it still enough? So if you want to find out how much is spent on care for the over 65s in your area, the BBC has created a new online tool. You can find it on the BBC website.
Police are searching for a British woman who disappeared from outside a bar in Tenerife in the early hours of Friday morning. 28-year-old Amy Louise Gerard had been working as an animal trainer at the Tenerife Marine Park. She was last seen outside an Irish bar in Puerto de la Cruz in the north of the island. The Foreign Office says it is assisting her family.
The head of MI6, Alex Younger, will warn Russia not to underestimate our capabilities in a rare speech today. He's going to describe how the intelligence service exposed those behind the Novichok poisoning in Salisbury, when a former Russian spy and his daughter were targeted and a British woman died. Mr. Younger will address students at St Andrews University.
A major international climate conference begins in Poland later today, with senior UN officials warning the threat to humanity from global warming has never been greater.
Political leaders from around the world will be there. Sir David Attenborough is going to make a speech on behalf of the public. Let's find out more about this summit from our science correspondent, Matt McGrath. Matt, good to see you. It's certainly busy behind you, but many people, I suppose, will be wondering what difference will this make, especially considering where it is. Poland in itself a controversial venue.
Absolutely, Naga. Yes, it's really filling up here at the moment. Not just David Attenborough speaking today, who is a big draw undoubtedly, but about 40 heads of government and state from around the world. And they're all here to lend their support to the negotiators who will be in this Polish city of Katowice for the next 2 weeks, trying to advance something called the Paris Rulebook, which is a rather technical document about putting the Paris Climate Agreement signed 3 years ago into practice. It's a difficult challenge for them. It's a very highly technical thing, but the leaders here are here to reinforce the message from science and the message from ordinary people around the world too, to say that, look, climate change is happening, it's real, emissions are going up, and if we are serious about tackling this problem this century, we need to act, and act soon. And the scientists are saying that we need to cut emissions of carbon dioxide and other warming gases in the next 12 years by about half. Otherwise, we were in serious trouble. So that's the message that's going on here today, and you'll be seeing that the negotiators of the next 2 weeks will be trying to put into practice the helpful messages they will get from St David Attenborough and others today.
Matt McGrath, thanks very much.
Police in New York have managed to track down a British couple who got engaged in the city last Friday and then, horror, dropped the ring down a grate in Times Square.
Here are the CCTV images showing post-proposal, I'm assuming this, Dan. This is Danielle Anthony and John Drennan unsuccessfully trying to retrieve the ring. Police officers did, though, manage to rescue it. They even cleaned it. NYPD then tweeted last night that arrangements were being made to return the ring to the pair. I wonder if lots of people are remembering if they're married or were married, their proposals. Romantic time.
Yes, romantic times. Yes, I'm trying to remember mine. No, I was joking. It's a long time ago. It was in a park. It went well.
Oh, mine was in a park too. We'll talk about it later. Yeah.
Wasn't together though.
Definitely not. No. Time now is 10 minutes past 8.
Oh yeah, today marks the start of another crunch week for Mrs May's Brexit plans.
Today she's going to face a row over what legal advice she received on her EU withdrawal agreement, and then there's a 5-day Commons debate. Let's not forget there's a proposed head-to-head debate on television with the Labour Party's leader, Jeremy Corbyn. That's not been confirmed just yet.
How's it going to pan out for Mrs May? Well, two men in the know join us now. Political journalists Kevin Maguire and Andrew Pearce. Good morning to you, gentlemen. Quite a few things I'd like to talk to you about this morning. Let's start with the Attorney General today. I suppose, Kevin, we'll come to you on this first of all. It's a question really, sort of two sides of it. How much we feel we need to know and whether we need to respect client confidentiality.
Yeah, and what does Theresa May have to hide by not publishing it? Because this isn't any old decision. This is Brexit, momentous decision for the entire country for a long time. Now, I go back to 2003 in Iraq, and Tony Blair wouldn't publish the legal advice then when he was pressed. And the reason was the Attorney General had changed his decision down the line, and there was something to hide. And I say now, if she has nothing to hide, she will publish it.
Andrew?
Well, I mean, what's going to happen is if they don't agree, they're going to be dragged to the bar of the House, forced to do it. It could leak, which is possible because some politicians have seen the entire legal opinion. But the other difficulty is this. Back in 2007, a certain opposition politician called Theresa May wrote to the then Prime Minister Gordon Brown saying, "Oi, publish the legal advice over the Iraq war." So it could look like double standards for the Prime Minister.
Could look like it is.
And the other thing is, if you look at the front page of the Daily Telegraph today, even Ollie Robbins, who's her chief Brexit Sherpa, doesn't like the idea of this backstop, which he suggests we may never be able to leave. And that's why MPs want to see the legal advice.
And so much for the sovereignty of Parliament and taking back control. MPs over the road vote to see the full legal advice. In Downing Street, I'm not going to show you. Come on, Theresa, you can't get away with that.
Andrew, what about the issue of Chris Mason was standing where you were a few minutes ago, and he was talking about saying, slightly with his tongue in his cheek, that he had more chance of winning the world's strongest man than Theresa May did of getting this deal through Parliament next week. How much of an uphill struggle is the next few days going to be?
He's got a better chance of being the world's strongest man than me and him. Have you seen the state of us? And we've just had a very unhealthy cooked breakfast, which I had to pay for, of course. But I do not think she is going to get this through in any shape or form. I think they've probably worked this out in Downing Street. What they're now working out is about the scale of the defeat, if they can keep it in a low level of numbers. But when you've got people like Joe Johnson on one side and Bill Cash on the other side of the Tory argument, it's going to be very difficult. I still think she'll be back very quickly with a second proposal, maybe a plan B, which will have much more chance. But this plan, I can't see that she's going to win this vote.
Kevin?
Oh, can you imagine MPs having a second vote, but no second vote for the people, for the pledge in a referendum?
Not that
you
one
think
again.
one's all right and not the other one? Come on.
No.
But no, it is impossible to see how she will win a week tomorrow in that place. Not least because people like Sam Gyimah, the universities minister, people are resigning still. She should be getting their support. And I think Chris Mason down the gym could be a fantastic breakfast TV series. But I'm not sure he's going to be very muscle-bound very quickly. And equally, I think Theresa May looks incredibly feeble.
He's going on about a people's vote. Why does he call it a people's vote? What he means, Kevin Maguire, is a second referendum, because people like Maguire still refuse to accept the people have spoken, 17.4 million. There's no great clamour for a second referendum, not least with his own Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn.
The only people
at least
afraid
not this week, not
of the
this
democracy
week.
of another referendum
We've had a referendum.
People, Brextremists, who won the last one with lies, fibs and porkies.
Project
That's
Fear,
the only
mate.
people
Project
who should
Fear.
be frightened of democracy.
Well, do you argue like this over your cooked breakfast as well, Andrew? Are you best friends over breakfast?
No, we didn't speak. The only time he spoke was when he said, "Will you get the bill?" That was it.
The sausage made more sense than him.
One more question about this TV debate, which might, I see you laughing already, might take place this Sunday, could be potentially a clash with I'm a Celebrity. I suppose more importantly, who should be involved in that debate, Kevin, and where is it going to take place?
Yeah, I do think if a TV debate can't be organised, what chance of a decent Brexit? I can see the argument for May and Corbyn, but I also understand the argument from people who want a harder Brexit and those who want another referendum and Remain supporters wanting to be involved too. But I think let's just get May and Corbyn sorted out first and have an undercard. You know, lots of other programmes if people want to listen on TV, on radio, online. I'm all for these debates, but it is pretty pitiful. And what's happened, of course, is Downing Street have proposed the debate and they want it exactly on their terms. That ain't how it works. You have to have a negotiation on the format, when it is, which channel, who's going to do the questioning and so on. You cannot have dictatorship from number 10 Downing Street, and that's what they're attempting to do.
And there was the point. Downing Street proposed a debate, not Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party, because Jeremy Corbyn changes his mind on Brexit every other week. It's the Tories who the government proposed on the BBC. What's wrong with having it on the national broadcaster? What is Jeremy Corbyn frightened of?
Look, Theresa May chickened out at the last election. David Cameron chickened out 3 years ago.
It's not the last election.
If I was
Kevin,
Labour, I would demand that you have to have a commitment from the Conservatives. There will always be TV debate at elections. I'm all for this debate. I want more debate. But you know that your lot just want it on their terms and a one-off, and it's because she is desperate.
As I said, Theresa May proposed it, and Jeremy Corbyn is trailing in her wake on this one. I think it should happen, even though we've got 5 days of debate in the Commons too.
She's like on a long Bush-Tucker trial in there, and she's losing.
I'm not sure you agree on the rights and wrongs of a second referendum. I think you need a second breakfast this morning, the pair of you. So go away and enjoy yourselves.
Good to talk to you.
Lovely to see you, Andrew and Kevin. They're always good value. And that is a debate that many people are having watching this week as well. And it's another one of those crucial weeks, isn't it, where there's so many big decisions to be made, so many big topics to be discussed. And whether this debate will take place on Sunday, who knows at the moment, and where it will take place.
Indeed, yes. Just to keep you up to date, Theresa May has said she's open to a television debate on the BBC. Jeremy Corbyn has indicated that he would prefer it to be on ITV. There is no agreement as yet as to whether or not this debate will take place on Sunday evening.
And you were talking to Vince Cable earlier on the programme, and the point they were making about the second referendum, and he was making the case of, well, what's the question going to be? And yeah.
How many?
Yeah.
So much to talk about. Chris Mason will keep us up to date, of course, throughout the morning. At 17 minutes past 8, should we get some clarity on the weather? Now, Sarah, I don't know. I was looking at this picture earlier. Has that been filtered out? It looks like the clouds have been superimposed. Is that a Christmas market? It just looks beautiful. I'm not sure it's real.
It does. This is all real. This is from one of our regular weather watchers, actually. This is from Norfolk. The skies above Norwich this morning. It is beautiful. It looks almost too good to be true, doesn't it? But we've got blue skies there, beautiful sunrise around. Not everywhere in the country is quite this scenic first thing in the morning, though. We have got some showers, particularly across western parts of England and Wales too. There's also a risk first thing of some icy stretches in Scotland, where we've had temperatures overnight falling below freezing after yesterday's wet weather. So this morning, this is how things are looking. We've got that rain across Wales, the southwest of England too. A few heavy bursts, possibly the odd rumble of thunder. That rain then tracks its way eastwards across really the bulk of England and Wales. Anywhere north of, say, York towards Blackpool, it looks largely dry and clear. Much of Scotland, Northern Ireland also dry and clear through the day. Just 1 or 2 wintry flurries over the mountains of Scotland. Now, temperatures in the north, 6 to 8 degrees with that northerly breeze. Further south, we're looking at around 11 to 14 Celsius. Then the cloud and the showers clear away from eastern England as we move on into this evening and overnight. We've got clear skies, and I think tonight is going to be the coldest night of the week. So temperatures for many of us below freezing first thing tomorrow, just about above freezing for some of our towns and cities in the south. But for many of us, you'll be waking up to quite a sharp frost. Pictures like this first thing Tuesday morning. A chilly start to the morning, certainly. Again, watch out for the odd icy stretch across Scotland and 1 or 2 snow flurries over the mountains too. But for much of the UK, Tuesday looks a better day than we've seen recently. Much more sunshine, especially in the south, and also northern half of the UK, also dry and bright too. Temperatures colder than they have been, around 5 to 9 Celsius for most of us, but things turning milder from the southwest with the arrival of more cloud and outbreaks of rain. So it couldn't last long, that clear weather on Tuesday. Overnight into Wednesday, the next low pressure system brings us quite a lot of rain. It'll move in initially across the southwest, pushing into Northern Ireland, much of England and Wales during the early hours of Wednesday. Then as that rain meets that colder air over the mountains, it could well turn to snow for the North Pennines, the southern uplands too. A bit of snow for a time before it turns back to rain with milder air working in from the south. So temperatures 12 degrees or so in the south, still fairly chilly across northern Scotland on Wednesday. Now we're looking through Thursday and on into Friday, and the unsettled theme continues. We've got low pressure moving in from the Atlantic. Lots of isobars wrapping around that low pressure, especially on Friday. So it will be quite a wet and quite a windy end to the week. I think Friday we could see some gales, still some showers around through Thursday and Friday, but you'll be pleased to know that at the moment it looks like the weather should turn drier and brighter for Saturday. Back to you both.
Why are you saying at the moment?
It's still 5 days ahead.
Always a caveat with you, isn't there? Always.
Trying to cover all our bases.
Yeah, cover her back. Sarah, I'll see you later.
News this morning that the US and China have come to some sort of agreement over a trade dispute, and that's impacting the market. Victoria, morning to you.
Yes, good morning to you both. Yes, yeah, I said I'd have a look at the European markets for you. They opened about 21 minutes ago, and they are up. Now, this big issue, it's been affecting investors, investor confidence, and also business confidence as well. I'm talking about US President Donald Trump, of course, and his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping. They've been punishing each other's countries by placing big taxes on the goods that they sell towards each other. And over the weekend, the pair agreed to a 90-day truce. The stock markets have been delighted that these two biggest economies in the world have patched up at least some of their differences for now. The value of shares has soared right from Sydney all the way through to Shanghai. European stock markets up about 2% at the moment, so I'll keep an eye on those for you, and I'll have more on Twitter if you follow me. Now, BBC figures show a pretty dismal picture opening up across retail. At least 40,000 British jobs have been caught up in the turmoil on the high street this year. 20,000 roles have already been lost, and many more are still under threat after store closures from companies selling everything from toys to tech. And in the last hour, as if we needed any more proof that the high street is struggling, the newsagent firm McColl's has had to issue its second profit warning of the year. The firm, that's got about 1,600 convenience stores across Britain, says it's run into trouble for two reasons. The first is the collapse of one of its suppliers, and secondly, the overall fall in the amount that we are spending in the shops. So not great news for retailers and the people who work for them running up to the busy Christmas period. Back to you.
Thanks very much, Vic.
When Michelle Obama visited a London school back in, 2009, to talk about education, her speech had a really lasting impact on the pupils there.
I can imagine it would have. And the former First Lady returns to the city tonight. She's speaking at an event in front of almost 3,000 people.
Well, journalist Afua Hirsch will be at that talk tonight and joins us now. Good morning to you. Thank you very much for coming on. I mean, I don't want to make this sound like an ignorant question, but what is the enduring appeal, do you think, of Michelle Obama? Because there were, about 2,500 tickets available and 60,000 people wanted to be there. Is that right?
Yes, and just anecdotally, you know, within my own circles, I know people were staying up all night, some even camping outside the South Bank Centre hoping to get a ticket. So I think you're right. I mean, I've described it as a hype and a frenzy, and I think I'm one of the people who both loves Michelle Obama but also finds myself questioning what is it about her that makes us all kind of suspend our critical faculties and flock to her. And I think that there's something actually, in having just read her book, Becoming, which is why she's here, because she's book touring, I think it's something about the way she's actually very ordinary. She hasn't had the most remarkable life. She's had quite a normal childhood. She became a lawyer. She met and fell in love with a man. She's somebody clearly of the huge amount of motive and drives and principles and hopes for a better. And yet she's a mother, and her book is full of details about the struggles of looking after your children and providing them with normality while your husband is the 44th president of the United States. And I think it's that ordinariness that we relate to as women, you know, the juggle, the attempt to stay true to your principles while manage your home, while manage your relationship. And she's always seemed so honest and authentic. She got through 2 times the White House with no scandals and no big dramas. She just seemed to be consistently herself, and I think that is incredibly inspiring for women.
Do you think, I know she ruled herself out, do you think at some stage she might run for office herself? Because there are so many people who feel passionately about, you know, her ability to speak for many people, particularly women, but also others as well. So, and that's quite a rarity as well, isn't it, in politics, and maybe something she could use in future life.
Yeah, I found her book quite funny on this regard because it's an extremely political book. It's quite clear where she stands, how invested she is in seeing progress in society. She clearly identifies as a black woman, as an African-American woman. That struggle for racial equality has been a big part of her consciousnness. So she writes this very political book and then says at the end in one sentence, I have no plans to run for office. And it kind of isn't quite enough, really, to convince me that the political aspiration and experience she has will never be put to use. And it's clear she's quite troubled by events since she and her husband Barack Obama left the White House. So I personally think that that door is still definitely open.
And you talk about the fact that, you know, she sort of glories in the ordinary nature of her life. And she talks quite openly in the book, doesn't she, about struggles of holding the family together and counselling and things like that, when I suppose she tries to portray her marriage as normal, and yet she was married to the most powerful man in the world, making huge decisions that impacted on millions of people.
Well, for me, that was a really important piece to the puzzle because I've read Barack Obama's 2 books, including the one where he charts his journey into the Senate, as it was at that point. And, you know, it's from his perspective, being in the Senate, following this campaigning strategy and the things he's working for, and there's this big gap around what's going on at home and how does being that person affect your home life, your relationship. And she very honestly has filled in a lot of those blanks by talking about the loneliness of being at home on her own with the girls a lot and resenting him for not being there when she felt she needed him, and them needing to seek counselling to try and heal some of the rifts that emerge between them. And again, that's just something that I think so many people relate to. You know, it is hard, it's not perfect. And from the outside, they seemed this perfect family, but at the same time, it didn't feel like a deception. And now I think it works for her to reveal what was really going on. It makes sense, but at the same time, it's reassuring in a way that somebody like her has gone through what everyone does, but also been able to come through it. And she is somebody who offers hope, ultimately. And this isn't to say that their record in the White House has been perfect. Many of the people I know who love her so much are also very critical of Barack Obama's tenure. They had superbly high expectations for what he could achieve in overcoming structural injustice in America, for ending the war on terror. You know, he didn't do those things. I personally think that some of those expectations were completely unrealistic, but it's right to be critical about his tenure, and the ultimate legacy of his time in office was his successor, who may, you know, President Trump may not have been elected were it not for Obama. But at the same time, Michelle is somebody who makes people feel good and inspired and hopeful.
It'll be interesting to see how that goes tonight. Afua Hirsch, thank you very much for that. Who is going to be one of the fortunate sort of 2,700, I think, who are there, but many disappointed not to be able to be inside listening in.
It is time to get the news, travel and weather where you are. We'll see you shortly.
Up next on the BBC News Channel, a look at what's happening in the world of global business with Business Live. And in half an hour, it's the news at 9 with all the latest stories.
Hello there, good morning. It's been a rather chilly start across northern parts of the UK, but elsewhere, fairly mild this morning. We continue from the weekend where temperatures got up to 15 degrees Celsius across southern parts. Through today, though, rain moving its way eastward across Wales, through the Midlands, eastern parts of England. A few showers across the far south of England. But across northern parts of England, across Scotland and also Northern Ireland, well, it's quite chilly this morning, but there'll be plenty of sunshine as we go into this afternoon. Just a few showers, which could turn wintry over the higher ground. A bit of a difference in temperatures, 6 to 8 Celsius in the north, 11 to 14 degrees further south. And that cloud and that rain will continue to move away as we go through this evening. Some showers moving their way through Northern Ireland and into the west of Scotland, but actually with lots of clear spells, it's going to turn quite chilly as we go into the early hours of Tuesday morning. You can see by the blues there a widespread frost, particularly in northern and eastern areas. And temperatures probably just staying the other side of freezing further south. But a bit of a cold and frosty start on Tuesday. Plenty of clear spells, lots of sunshine through the morning. The cloud, though, will gradually increase from the southwest, making the sunshine turn hazy across a good portion of England and Wales. Eventually, rain moves its way into the far southwest as well. The best of the sunshine is the further north and east you go. And temperatures, as we go through Tuesday, well, they'll be down a little bit, about 6 to 8 Celsius. That rain across the southwest is associated with that weather system. That's going to spread its way further north and eastward as we go through Wednesday. So quite a wet day on Wednesday, especially for England and Wales during the morning. The far north and northeast of Scotland staying mostly dry with some sunshine. That rain gradually edges its way further eastward. There could be a bit of snow over the higher ground of the Pennines. The southern uplands. Temperatures again about 8 to 12 degrees across England and Wales, always chillier with that colder air in the far northeast. That's all from me. Bye-bye.
Hello, this is Business Live from BBC News with Sally Bundock and Ben Bland.
Putting on the brakes on tariffs. President Trump says China's cutting taxes on American cars amid a trade war truce.
Live from London, that is our top story on Monday, the 3rd of December. The change of gear comes after a weekend which saw the world's two biggest economies agree not to increase tariffs for 90 days so they can talk through their differences. Also coming up in the programme, Qatar pulls out of the oil cartel OPEC as prices rise and the country sets even more of its focus into gas. We will be live in the Middle East. We'll also keep an eye on the markets for you. Europe building on the rally in the Asian markets after that breakthrough in the trade war, reaching a sort of a truce between the US and China.
And cleaning up in the men's beauty sector, we're going to talk to the man behind a new range of grooming products with a natural twist. And today we want to hear your stories of that unexpected big bill. It's reported transatlantic flights on Aer Lingus flights, for those who do not turn off their phones or switch to flight mode, they risk a huge roaming charge bill. So we'd like to know, what unexpected bill have you received? Don't hold back. Confess on this programme. Hashtag BBC BizLive.
Yeah, get those tweets coming in. Confess to me and Sally. We'll just share it with everyone watching at home as well. Let's start, though, with news of yet another sign that the US-China trade war may be easing. In the last few hours, President Trump has tweeted that China has agreed to reduce and remove tariffs on cars coming into China from the US. Now, this comes after the leaders of the world's two biggest economies agreed to a trade war truce at their meeting at the G20 in Argentina over the weekend. Now, that deal, as outlined by the White House, means that the US and China have agreed to refrain from imposing any new tariffs for 90 days. That means the US holding back from January's planned increase of tariffs on more than $200 billion worth of Chinese goods. The plan had been to raise the tariffs from 10% to 25%. Now, in return, China says it will buy a very substantial amount of farm, energy and industrial goods, though the amount was not specified. This is to try and reduce the trade gap with the US. And there will be fresh talks on the thorniest issues for Donald Trump, claims of China's intellectual property theft and the forced transfer of technology. So the question is, how has this all gone down in China? Well, our correspondent Robin Brandt is in the commercial capital, Shanghai. Robin, is this a deal that was good enough for the Chinese president to go back and sell at home?
Well, he's certainly gained himself some time. There is now a 90-day period for negotiations between the two sides. If no successful longer-term agreement is reached, then the tariffs are back on. What's most interesting, though, is many elements of this deal, essentially a ceasefire, to be honest, are not being reported here by state media in China. You look to People's Daily, you look to Xinhua, the state news agency. There's no mention of this 90-day period of negotiations. No mention of that pledge to increase Chinese acquisitions of agriculture, in particular things like soybean and sorghum. No mention of America's insistence on negotiating immediately over these claims that China continues to steal intellectual property and force technology transfer from American and other foreign firms who want to invest in this country. So we're seeing two very different versions of the outcome of this meeting being reported in China and outside of China. There's no doubt for now we get a ceasefire. The markets like it. It brings some calm back to the situation. President Trump thinks he's got something else from Xi Jinping as well. He thinks he's got a pledge to reduce tariffs on autos coming into China. But look, that's essentially a reset. They were due to go down from 25% to 15% anyway. They went back up in retaliation, a move by the Chinese, and now they might be going back down again. I mean, and that looks like a bit of a retail gain for the president. He can bang that drum back from Buenos Aires, but essentially it takes us back to kind of where we were before the trade war blew up.
And Robin, just briefly, it's important to emphasise this is a truce Not a resolution to the underlying issues, is it?
No, it's not at all, and I have to say there is huge scepticism really about whether there can be any significant progress on the core issue, which particularly for some around the President at the White House is this issue about market access, theft of intellectual property and technology transfer. You know, in this 90-day period, the Americans are insisting both sides have agreed immediate negotiations on that. That's not even being reported here on China. And can they reach some kind of deal in just 3 months on fundamental issues at the heart of Chinese industrial policy? I mean, I suspect not.
OK, Robin, thanks very much. Robin Brandt there in Shanghai.
Well, despite all that, markets are looking on the bright side. That's the global financial markets. Let's go to our Asia business hub. Karishma Vaswani is there. Karishma, I can see in Europe we're all headed upwards, and that was the story in Asia, wasn't it?
Yes, indeed, Sally. Although I have to say, since we last spoke, we've seen some of the shine come off Asian markets today, I think reflecting some of that skepticism that Robin was just talking about. But having said that, all the major indices out here did see a bit of a jump thanks to what's being called this truce in the US-China trade war. It is a temporary truce, remember, the 90-day deadline when they've got to fix all of the issues, that those gaping positions between the two sides. It does seem very difficult to see how they can try and close that gap. But the US-China trade war has been the major risk for investors out in Asia this year. Many were very anxious that we were going to see even more tariffs in 2019. So that's on hold for now. Why does Asia care about this? Well, this isn't just about the US and China. China is the biggest trading partner for many countries in the region. So if there's a downgrade in economic forecasts for China because of the trade war, that pain is felt out here too. Many Asian companies, Sally, have put their factories and supply chains out in China because of lower costs there. And that's where the bulk of their products come from. They were worried that those products would be hit by these US tariffs as well. But interestingly, even though these firms, I've spoken to many of them, have said that for now, their immediate plans to shift their supply chains out of China have been put on hold. That's not to say they're not still looking keenly for other options. And I think that underlines the fact that many in the business community out here in Asia don't see this as a resolution to the trade war. They just see it as having bought some time, and we may well be back in this position in 90 days.
All right, Karishma, for now, thank you very much indeed.
Now, in the last couple of hours, we've had some breaking news from the oil world. Qatar is pulling out of the OPEC producers cartel.
Yes, and this comes just days ahead of their big meeting, the OPEC meeting, which is at the end of the week, where they could extend production cuts, something which has been pushing oil prices higher.
Our correspondent Paul Blake is in Dubai for us. Paul, good to see you. So, do we know why Qatar has made this decision to pull out?
Well, they say this is all about their focus on liquefied natural gas, and that's important because Qatar is the world's #1 producer of LNG, as liquefied natural gas is commonly called. But I think it's also important to look at some of the other context here. First of all, Qatar is the 11th biggest producer within OPEC of petroleum. Now, that's not actually that big in a organization of about 15 countries. It produces just under 2% of OPEC's oil. Now, the big geopolitical context, I think, is the way that this is going to be viewed. Qatar says that the decision to pull out of OPEC has nothing to do with geopolitics, and what it means by that is nothing to do with the blockade that Saudi Arabia and other Arab countries have imposed on it since June of 2017. But I think the market will be looking at it in that context and be looking at it as a furthering tension between Qatar and the other countries. You have to remember that Saudi Arabia is the de facto leader of OPEC, and they are also leading this blockade against Qatar. So you can see it within that context of the blockade, this decision by Qatar to pull out of OPEC.
And Paul, briefly, another thing we must mention when it comes to the price of oil and the big surge we saw earlier today, that was all off the back of President Putin meeting with leaders in Saudi Arabia and those agreeing to cut production into the new year.
That's right. I mean, we've had oil prices sliding for the past few weeks, dramatic falls in the oil price. This morning, we've seen oil just popping up about 4%, 4 to 5% in the wake of those meetings in Buenos Aires between Vladimir Putin and Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince of Saudi Arabia. Now, they've agreed to continue cooperating under what's called OPEC+, and that's because Russia is not part of OPEC, but that has provided some optimism to the market that cuts will be found and a consensus around cuts will be found.
OK, Paul, thanks very much. Paul Blake there for us. Let's look at the markets. Hong Kong and Shanghai were leading the surge across Asian markets on Monday after the US agreed to suspend imposing tariffs on China for 90 days, 3 months, while oil prices, as we were just hearing, have soared on expectations of a big production cut. Europe is starting strongly, building on that rally in Asia. Look at that. Strong start to the week across all the main European indexes. Energy shares particularly benefiting from the rise in the oil price, though, of course, the UK, all eyes will be on the way the Brexit negotiations go this week and the legal advice that the government is under pressure to publish. We'll see how that affects the UK markets and the pound, of course. Michelle Fleury has the details of what's ahead on Wall Street.
One piece of the economy that's caused a bit of anxiety of late is the car industry. Witness last week's announcement of job cuts by General Motors and the President's angry response. Well, December kicks off with some cold, hard facts about the business that might add to the nervousness. All the big car makers release their sales data for November. Now, while the overall number of cars and light trucks that were sold will remain high, analysts think that for the first time in 9 years, sales for the month of November will show an annual decline. America's enthusiasm for buying a new car hasn't disappeared, but it may have peaked. Also on Monday, investors will look to major monthly survey of managers in the manufacturing sector to check that they still think the US economy is headed for more strong growth.
That's Michelle Fleury, part of our team in New York, where we've got familiar face James Hughes with us, Chief Market Analyst at Axie Trader. James, look at that screen.
Yes, lovely boost this morning for everyone.
Indeed. Let's talk about cars to start with in the US car industry, because Michelle was talking about there that we're going to have all this gloomy news out of the car makers in the US, and of course this follows on from GM last week saying they've got to close factories, lay off thousands of people, and yet Trump today tweeting China's going to drop those tariffs on US cars going into China, 40% tariffs.
Yeah, and of course there is timing put down to that, very political timing from Donald Trump, because this news today about the car industry is going to be a particularly bad one. Of course, cars are seen as one of the bedrocks of the US, or used to be one of the bedrocks of the US economy. It hasn't been like that for a number of years now. Ever since the financial crisis, car industry has been really in big trouble.
And it's so symbolic, isn't it, for the politicians?
Absolutely.
You know, the car makers are doing well, it's the bread and butter, make America great again, all that kind of stuff.
It is the bread and butter of Donald Trump's pledge to the country. And to say that have today where they're not performing well, it is great timing for him to come out and say, yes, they may not be performing well, but don't worry, we're going to make things better.
Look at what I negotiated in Buenos Aires.
Absolutely.
And talking breakthroughs, I mean, they've, you know, the truce that has been agreed to hold off on any new tariffs between the US and China. We saw the surge in Asia. I mean, the picture across Europe, you know, all in the green, particularly the export-heavy DAX. Clearly, some optimism and a return perhaps to more risk sentiment this morning.
Yes, it is very much risk on this morning, so people looking for those riskier assets because there is that little bit of optimism. But remember, this is just, as we've heard from a number of different people this morning already, this is just the base information about this. We don't know much about details. There's this old cliche in the market, buy the rumour, sell the fact. And this is the rumour that the headline comes out. It's only a 90-day break that we've seen at the moment, and as your other guest has said, that we could be looking at 90 days.
90-day break flows conveniently through Christmas, that festive season, and the Chinese New Year, which is huge in Asia in January, February. But let's talk about oil, James. Qatar leaving OPEC. Russia, Saudi Arabia doing a deal on production cuts. OPEC meeting at the end of this week. I mean, the price of oil really up strongly.
Yeah, but we've needed it. The oil price has been one of the most important, always is one of the most important to all markets because it drives so much. It has been so under pressure. But the fact that Qatar is leaving is a big thing in terms of the fact they've been in there for 50 odd years, but they're not one of the biggest oil producing nations within there. Obviously Saudi Arabia are the biggest, but it all adds to a much needed boost in this oil prices, not just for the countries producing the oil price, but for stock markets, for other companies around the area.
All right, James, thank you for now. James will come back. Hopefully, think about your biggest unexpected bill, please.
Oh, I don't want to.
we want to hear that story.
Yeah, and we want to hear about yours as well. In the meantime, let's round up some other main business news for you. There's been a fall in how much prices are rising in Annual consumer inflation was 21.6% in November, which is lower than the peak of just over 25% in October. Could be a sign that the country's economic crisis is easing, will make the country's huge debts more affordable, and the currency has gained ground recently against the US dollar.
The US media group Nexstar is set to become the country's largest operator of local TV stations after a deal to buy Tribune Media for about $4.1 billion. It comes 3 months after Tribune's sale to Sinclair Group, currently the largest US local TV operator, failed over regulatory hurdles. Tribune's 42 TV stations reach approximately 1 million households across the US.
Staff at the UK fashion group Ted Baker allege there is a culture of forced hugging by the firm's founder and boss, which they say must end. A staff petition also accuses the founder, Ray Kelvin, of inappropriate comments and behaviour. The firm says hugs are part of its culture, but are absolutely not insisted upon.
Plenty more to come, including cleaning up in the men's beauty sector even. We're going to talk to the man behind a new range of grooming products with a natural twist.
Yes, stay with us. You're with Business Live from the BBC.
First, though, let's focus on the retail sector in the UK. I'm sure you're very aware it's had a really difficult year. Many major retailers announcing closure and redundancies.
Yes, sluggish sales, rising costs and stiff competition from online shopping have affected something like 40,000 workers in the sector. This is according to figures compiled by the BBC.
Well, let's speak to our colleague Victoria Fritz, who's up in Salford for us today. Victoria, what more did the BBC find out?
Well, we've been working with the University of Lancaster and we found out that already so far this year, 20,000 retail jobs have already gone, okay? So 20,000 already gone. Another 20,000 are at risk. I mean, we're talking about just the big stores, the likes of Maplin's, Debenhams, Mothercare, House of Fraser, Carpetright, you name it. There have been either store closures or they're closing down completely. Now, one of the interesting things about this is that there is, as you said, this big restructuring going on in the industry. And the University of Lancaster says that about a third of workers who lose their jobs actually end up going back into the sector. So the big question, of course, is, well, where are they going? What are they doing? A lot of them do have transferable skills, people working in retail, and so they are finding other jobs in all sorts of industries, such as manufacturing, for example, warehousing, the other side of the retail story. If we're buying lots of things online, well, all of that needs to be packaged. It all needs to come to us somehow. Deliveries, for example. So the changing nature of retail means that it's not so much that we're seeing lots of job closures and that means that people are leaving the industry completely. The type and the nature of these jobs are changing. What was really interesting, talking to the Professor of Economics for the University of Lancaster about these figures, he's been looking at these figures for 5 years. He's saying that there's been a hollowing out of the retail industry. So you're still seeing low-skilled jobs, you're still seeing people who need to clean, for example, and high-end jobs as well, but a real hollowing out of those middle jobs.
OK, Victoria, thanks very much. Good to see you. Victoria Fritz there for us.
Well, while we're talking retail in the UK, this is someone who is getting more and more of a grip of the high street. It's Mike Ashley, the founder of Sports Direct. Well, he'll be appearing before a panel of MPs later today to answer their questions about the future of the high street. He has a big stake in Debenhams. He's also now owning House of Fraser, among others.
Hello, you're watching Business Live. Our top story, putting the brakes on the tariffs. President Trump says China is cutting taxes on imports of American cars. This is amid the truce in the trade war that the Chinese and the US presidents agreed on the sidelines of the G20 summit at the weekend.
And it's music to the ears of financial markets. Let's look at the European markets trading right now. After a strong session in Asia, they're all up over 2%. And among the winners today, the big oil stocks, Shell, BP, others, all up over 2% on the rise in the price of oil.
Now, moisturisers, face wash, part of the daily routine for many men, as more and more are choosing to spend money sprucing up their appearance. I do try. It doesn't always work, but I do try.
I'm sure you do. Mr. Moisturiser. So last year, the global market for male grooming was worth $57 billion, and some projections expect it's going to reach almost $80 billion in the next 5 years.
Yeah, growth is expected to surge in Latin America, Asia Pacific, the Middle East and Africa over the next few years. Sales, though, already rising steadily here in Europe as well.
One firm trying to capitalise on all of this is Heath. It was founded 18 months ago by a father and son team. We have the son with us, Harry Aronson, co-founder of Heath, smiling from ear to ear when he heard all those statistics. Good news for you. And you brought in a few of your